had this separate room in our apartment. She closed the door after we did our prayer for the end of the night. She closed the door, and I was like, oh no, what's going on? Like, usually she just walks out. And then she like stood in front of me with her like arms crossed, and I was like on the couch. And she was like, so I've noticed that you don't wear your garments all the time. And I was wondering why. After she asked that question, anxiety just like struck me in the heart, and I was like, what am I gonna say? That was my first emotion, and I was like, no, it's okay. Like, all these things were happening in my head, and I was like, this is a good opportunity, because previously to this, I was still praying in my personal study. I was praying and asking God to provide me, to send someone who is open-minded and ready to hear higher knowledge, higher truth, and to awaken unto things. I was praying for this. And so with her asking this question, I was like, wait, this could be the opportunity I've been asking for. And so after that initial fear, excitement, I was like, yes, okay. And so I started telling her, I was like, well, I've been studying the scriptures a lot, and it talks about experimenting upon God's words. And, you know, it also talks about not trusting in men, and not trusting in man or the arm of flesh. And so I've had to reflect and look back at my life. I'm like, wow, I've trusted on men a lot, like the prophet and the brethren. And I just want to only trust in God. I want to have experiences with everything, so I know that they're true. So I have my own conviction instead of just leaning on the beliefs and testimony of others.
No more go with the flow.
Yeah, no more go with the flow. I need to have my own rock, my own foundation. Because if people ask me these questions, I don't want to just be like reciting things that I'd been told to say. I want to be like, this is why, and because I have an experience with it. So I was telling her all these things. I mentioned the prophet. I mentioned President Russell M. Nelson. And I mentioned, you know, testing the words, not trusting in man.
Are you noticing any physical feedback from her? Consternation or interest?
She was standing in front of me, and is
she still in Superwoman pose?
Yeah, I'd say so. She started having this like confused, concerned look on her face, like, oh no, like, wait a minute. But I was like, I'm going to ignore these physical signs she's giving me. I'm just going to keep talking.
I think it would be easier for her and other members in general if your response is, I just don't know if I believe. But instead, you've got a response that's indicating that you're filled with faith.
Yeah. I was like, I want to follow Christ. I want to follow God. And he's God. I told her that God told me to start experimenting and not wearing my garments anymore. And to me, like, her posture changed. She was like, oh no. Like,
that's got to be from Satan.
That's no. And I could tell that like it wasn't flowing. And then eventually the Spirit's like, you should stop talking right now. And I was like, so yeah, that's why.
Was that your companion or the Spirit that said stop talking?
I think it was it was the Spirit. Like, she didn't say anything this whole time.
That's enough for now. She's
like, that's enough. And I was like, okay. And then she just like stood there, and I was like looking at her, and she was like, okay. And she was like, I could tell she was like thinking. And she's like, started going towards the door like she was just going to walk out.
Give me a little bit of physical demeanor, because, I mean, that's what we have in these situations. Was it indicating concern? Was it indicating contemplation, mixture?
I feel like it was both. It was like she was trying to process what I had just said. And she was also like concerned, because it's obviously stuff that she's not used to hearing. She hasn't been trained to believe these things or teach those things.
Well, because it sounds like most of those that you're teaching kind of have a real basic Jesus foundation.
Yes.
And you're somebody who not only studies the scriptures, but you're now contemplating, well, why did they say President Nelson is a prophet? What are the fruits I should examine? Yeah. And it sounds like she's never contemplated that for herself.
No, she's never even questioned the temple. In fact, she has an incredible love for the temple. And she had told me previously to this, like, her garments have saved her from like life-threatening situations and stuff, like, and I was like, huh. And that also added more confusion and questions to me, like, do they actually protect us and all this kind of stuff? And that added to my experimenting of like, is this actually a garment given by God? And so I think all of these things were probably swirling in her head. She was like, okay, I mean, I have to think about that.
Were you expressing to her what you expressed in the interview a little bit ago, to where you noticed a more natural love to be connected with God and Jesus Christ?
I did. I was like, I love Christ and God way more than I ever did before. And I feel so much closer to him. And why would that not be the case if I was disobeying him, you know? And she ended up just thinking, standing there for a minute. It was kind of quiet, and
was she immediately Commissioner Gordon on the bat phone calling up a mission president?
I don't think it was right then, but it was. I feel like a few days later. I don't really exactly know the exact day she did that.
Did her demeanor or interactions with you noticeably change from that point?
Yes, I would say so. Because she told me the other sisters had noticed too, and they actually had talked about it when I was like in the shower or something, so I wasn't around. And I was like, so after we were done having this conversation, I was like, hey, so if you wouldn't mind, like, just like I'd rather talk to the other sisters myself, because I lived with 3 other sisters at the time.
So there's 2 companionships in the
there's
apartment.
2 companionships, yeah. And so I was like, please don't tell the other sisters what I just told you. Like, I'd rather have them. I talked to them myself. And she was like, okay. And then I could just tell, like, she was just super off as she was leaving the room. And I was like, maybe that was the experience that God needed me to have. Like, maybe she's going to think
in other words, do you think she was wondering, how do I do damage control in this situation?
Probably. She was probably
natural.
Like, what am I going to do? I need to fix this. Yeah.
Okay.
And so after that instance, the next day, I had decided to continue my experimenting, and I had gone back to wear my garments to just like test things out again, you know. So we did comp study that morning, and I had a hammock out on my balcony, and so I was sitting in my hammock. She was like standing on the balcony, and she was like, there's some things I need to talk to you about. And I was like,
with that tone.
I was like, okay, what? Just like, it's about the conversation we had last night. And I was like, okay,
it sounds like a girlfriend breaking up with a boyfriend. We need to talk.
And I was like, okay. And then that fear came back. I was like, oh my gosh, what's she going to say? But then I was like, excitement. I was like, this is exciting. Like, I want to talk about this. So,
have you always naturally been able to summon confidence and excitement in those situations?
No, not really. It's something I had to learn. I like growing up, I think since I was in junior high, I had anxiety, like very intense anxiety. I worried about everything. And so this whole missionary experience was a big jump to like, okay, now you have to like let go of all of your fears and completely trust in God and Christ and the Spirit. And that was not something I was used to, because I only can trust in myself and my own abilities, and I don't trust in myself and my own abilities, so all this anxiety and stuff. And so that's my initial reaction whenever these conversations are brought up. But then, because I have this higher understanding, I'm able to push that back and instead push forward God and Christ and be like, no, it's okay. Like, you want to talk about this.
Okay. So, okay, now she tells you, we need to talk about some things.
Yes.
We need to talk.
And she's like, I'm worried for you. I'm worried about you and your spirituality. And I was like, okay.
It's about 3 days after the talk?
It was actually just the next day.
Oh, the next day.
The very next day. And she proceeded to tell me, like, she started bearing her testimony of the temple. And she said that she knows that garments are of God. And she knows that the temple is God's house, and that we perform saving ordinances in the temple. And she started, you know, she's like, I understand, like, when I went through the temple, when I left the temple after my endowment ceremony, I was like, this feels like a cult, but I know that was Satan and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, just listening to her, and she's like, I'm worried about you, like, I'm worried about your spirituality. I mean, do you even believe that the prophet, like, do you even believe in the prophet?
Were you right away picking up that it's not about following Christ and Heavenly Father?
Oh, sorry, what was that?
When she confronted you about this, were you picking up right away that this doesn't have anything to do with being a representative of Christ and Christ's church, Christ's gospel? It's right away being turned into the building where I received this garment, as well as the president of the church is a prophet.
Yes, it was a lot about being a representative of the church and being a representative for Russell Nelson. And I don't even really remember a whole lot of the conversation being revolved, at least on her end, being revolved around God and Christ. It was mostly like, you're not fitting into the box that we grew up in. You need to stop and you need to change. And so that was essentially the conversation that we were having. And I don't remember all of the details. I just remember a lot of it was just like these little like church doctrine things that she was trying to get across to me and kind of like reteach me of like how important they were.
I mean, it seems what one would expect if the Catholic Church was sending out missionaries and they would say, but you don't believe the Pope is God's representative?
Yeah.
So in other words, it doesn't have anything to do with the gospel other than, do you recognize this is the authorized representative?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit. So throughout the mission, as you're putting pieces together now, give us a little bit more insight. Was there push for all missionaries to get vaccinated? Was there sharing of President Nelson safe and effective? What was happening on the vaccine COVID front during your mission in Tennessee prior to this and throughout?
Yeah, so when I first got there, I think that's when like the COVID vaccine was starting to actually come out and become more known, I guess. And so I think my first zone conference that I was there, the mission president stood up in front of everybody and was like, we all need to get vaccinated. Like there's this big push. We need to get.
And he's talking to young people that have already passed a health examination to come out into the mission field. Yep. And he's saying everybody needs to get vaccinated. I
think a lot of it stemmed from that first arrival when I was in my mission and everyone had COVID. And that created this fear in missionaries and in the mission president of like, we need to get vaccinated because we don't want to have that happen again. We don't want to stop God's work because we're all sick, sort of thing. So it was a very big push. A lot of my mission companions, actually everyone I knew was vaccinated. And
you weren't?
I wasn't, no.
What was your reasoning for that, for saying no?
I had received, well, when it first came out, the vaccine first came out, I was like, actually, this is a great idea. But then as I thought about it for a bit, and as I came closer to Christ and to God, I felt in the uncertainty and almost like a warning to not get the vaccine, and I felt uneasy about it. Something felt off, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And so everyone around me in my mission was getting vaccinated. I mean, were you an actual missionary if you weren't getting vaccinated and following your mission president and the prophet, So it was definitely interesting.
In other words, that was the expectation to where following President Nelson included the expectation to get vaccinated.
Yeah, and obeying your mission president.
How often was this reemphasized?
I mean, at least...
Well, because let me at least let you know this. As somebody who is living a regular lifestyle at home with my family, it dominates every news cycle. Yeah. Any sort of corporate media, or basically any sort of media, it's revolving around COVID and people picking camps on how they view it. So was it that same level of intensity that you were experiencing as a missionary?
I wouldn't say it was the same level of intensity because we were kind of cut off from like any sort of news outlet in the world. So our mission president, he like replaced that. And sometimes, I mean, we would have zone conferences. He would emphasize it. We had this like group chat and like messenger where with all the missionaries of the mission and the mission president. And, he would put in there, or someone else would be like, everyone like needs to get like as many people can get vaccinated. If you do not have like a actual reason like why you can't, like health wise, to not get a vaccine, then you should get it. So like if you were already had an illness that could be intensified by getting the vaccine, then just don't get it. But if you only have a reason and you just don't want to, that's not a good enough reason, and you should get the vaccine.
And yeah, in other words, you need a legitimate excuse. Just saying I prayed about it and felt like it wasn't a good idea was not acceptable.
No, because how would that be right if everyone else is getting that other answer?
How are you interpreting that push coming from the ecclesiastical authority of the mission?
Well, so when the big push started happening in my mission, I already knew my answer was going to be no. And it wasn't until later on in my mission, actually more closer to when I left, when the actual the church presidency and the prophet came out with that newsletter about how important the vaccine was.
Hashtag safe and effective.
Yep. So at that point, I already made up my mind about the vaccine and about the brethren and the prophet. So I already knew, like, this is a total red flag.
Well, flesh this out real quick. When you say, I made up my mind about the first presidency and the brethren, made your mind up, what does that mean?
So at that point when that newsletter came out in like August, I think, of 2021, I had already come to the conclusion that President Russell Nelson was not a true prophet of God, and that the brethren of the church were not true disciples of Christ or apostles of Christ. They hadn't seen Christ. I already came to these conclusions by viewing their fruits and praying about it intensely.
Yeah. And that conclusion is directly connected with you feeling a closeness, a greater closeness to the Savior Jesus Christ, and to follow him and to share his gospel.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So now let's fast forward back to your missionary companion had the talk. We need to talk. And it sounds like there wasn't any sort of an agreement reached. Sounds like she recognized that she's not changing your mind about anything. No. So where do things go in the mission from there?
Well, I mean, after that conversation, which I clearly showed that I was like resisting everything she was saying, because every time she would say something, I'd be like, well, actually, and I would be like kind of like pushing back. I think she expected me to be like, you know what, you're right. I'll stop doing this.
A lot of people, well, let me give you an example from back in the 1990s when I was a wee teenager in Southern California. Regarding Prop 8 and gay marriage, the church invested millions and millions in the campaign to make same-sex marriage illegal in California. And so there was a lot of using President Hinckley is supporting this, so if you want to support the prophet, you get behind this. Get out your checkbooks, brethren. Was a lot of things happening in elders' quorum and different priesthood meetings that I observed, to where that's the ace card. You point to the president of the church, call him a prophet, and therefore, if you don't follow this thing that follows, you don't support God's prophet. It sounds like you're witnessing she thought she had an ace card by pointing to President Nelson.
She did.
And she was somewhat surprised when it didn't have the effect she was hoping.
Yeah. I remember she had asked about the prophet. She's like, do you even believe in the prophet? And I was like, well, I'm still
using
deciding.
that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, I believe in Jesus Christ. And I started like bearing my testimony of Jesus Christ. And I was like, I'm still like asking questions. I'm trying to receive confirmation if he's a true prophet of God. And of course she's like, oh my gosh. I could tell that she was like, oh no.
But in other words, I don't think she is, from your description, she's not making the connection to where a testimony of Christ is what saves. She's really pointing towards, look at the president, call him a prophet. Look at the president, call him a prophet.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
She's like, look at the temple and the prophet. That's your salvation.
Okay, so her ace card doesn't work. What next?
Yeah. So after the conversation, I clearly was like, the church is a box and God works in a circle, so it doesn't fit. And I actually said that to her, and she was like, oh my gosh. She's like, wait, what? And I was like, anyway. And she just wanted to end the conversation. And then we ended up finishing up, and she's like, I'm going to have to think about this. And she's like, I still respect you and like respect what your beliefs are. I still admire you as a missionary. So she was still like very welcoming and loving. Although she was there was that cognitive dissonance that need to defend her beliefs was still very, very there. And she was just very like, I could tell she just didn't know what to do with what I was telling.
Yeah.
With what I was telling with her and stuff.
Because you're expressing faith. You're expressing actual conviction in the Savior and his gospel.
Yeah.
It's just not your faith and conviction of the gospel is not connected to the president of the church. And
I think that kind of scared her, and it stirred up a lot of fear. Because when you're confronted with someone who is so like, they know this is true, and your foundation is based on men and like what you've been told growing up, that's not a strong foundation because you don't have your own experiences to back up your own beliefs. So if you don't have experiences to back up your own beliefs, then how are you testifying of something if you don't even have your own conviction? And I think that's why she took the next step in reporting me to mission president.
Going to the bat phone, making the call.
Yes, yep. Okay. She's like, we send in reinforcements.
Please tell me you know that reference, because when I was a little boy, there was reruns of the old school Batman episodes, and the commissioner had that red phone that puts Batman on the line.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, just making sure I'm not that old.
Yeah.
Okay, mission president becomes involved. What happens?
Well, so like that conversation we had on the balcony.
How long into the mission?
This is like 2 months into the mission.
Ooh, and
another interesting thing she said during that conversation was she was like, you have to be careful with who you tell this to, because you're going to have other companions that aren't going to be as understanding as I am.
I'm taking it easy on you, is her message.
That's what she said. And I was like, I know, like you're a great companion and stuff like that. My other companions didn't even say anything to me about anything. So she was the only one. But moving forward, I mean, I found out later that she apparently reported me to the mission president, probably, I don't know, maybe that day. This was only like the second transfer that we had together. So we still had like 6 more weeks until the end of our transfer. Mm-hmm. And so when we parted as companions, I got a new companion. And that started a brand new transfer. This is, I think it was late June of 2021. And we had mission president interviews that first week of the transfer, or the second week of the transfer. And I had no problems with the mission president, never really talked to him because, he's usually busy doing other things.
He's got a few hundred missionaries.
He's got a few hundred missionaries to deal with. So we had mission president interviews. I was the very last one of my district to be interviewed.
Okay. That was probably by design to make sure however long this needs to go, we don't have anybody waiting.
Yes. So my companion goes first. She comes out smiling, everyone's like, I love the mission president. Like he's such a great guy. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't have my own experiences with him, but he seems nice. We go into this interview. I sit down and he's in this other chair.
Are you feeling intimidated? Because you've talked about your ability to where maybe a little bit at first, but I'm ready. Maybe this is what God wants to happen.
Yeah.
Is that the mode you're going into again?
So kind of. So I usually, whenever it's like an authority figure, ever since my first job, even if it's like the most easygoing guy, I'm always intimidated by them because they're an authority figure. So I go into this meeting, I'm kind of intimidated, but I'm I have nothing to worry about. What's he gonna say? So I'm pretty calm when we start out the interview, and it's just small talk at the beginning, how's your mission going? How do you like sister so and so as your companion? And I was like, oh, she's great. She was a great trainer, all this kind of stuff. And then there's this shift in the conversation, and
noticeable.
The
car turns right.
Yep, exactly. And he looks at me and he gets very serious. And he's like, so your trainer told me that, your trainer told me some things that are kind of worrisome. And then that fear hit me again. I was like, oh no, did she tell the mission president I'm not wearing my garments? And then he continues and he says she's told me that you're not wearing your temple garments and that you're questioning the prophet. And I was like, I didn't know what to say.
And so those are his words. You're questioning the prophet.
Questioning the prophet. And I was like, yes. I just sat there and I was like, okay, I need to answer him. So I was like, he'll understand what I'm saying, I'm sure. Because he's read the scriptures. It clearly says, do not trust in man or the arm of flesh. And so I proceeded to start speaking about that. I was like, well, I read the scriptures. I studied them like a good missionary should. And I started talking about how, do not trust in man. Do not put your trust in the arm of flesh. And I was like, I told him about the verse in Alma about experimenting upon God's words and how I felt impressed to stop wearing my temple garments and to start questioning things and receiving experiences and answers for myself directly from God instead of from other people. That way I have my own sure foundation. So I told him all of that. And then he was like, you could just tell he was really concerned and he got in this mode of I need to fix this. I need to convince her again that these things are true.
What specific things?
The prophet, President Nelson is a prophet of God.
Okay.
And she needs to wear her temple garments. And so he asked me a few questions.
Well, let me at least say this. I know for sure on his mind is you taking off your garments is breaking covenants. And therefore, any doubts that you're having about President Nelson being a prophet must be a result of you breaking covenants with God.
Yes.
That's for sure his mindset.
For sure. And I was trying to explain to him that I've never felt closer to Christ and I felt closer to God. I feel like we're having more spiritual blessings in our mission work. And it was really hard during this interview to speak with the Spirit because I was so overwhelmed with this fear. In other situations, like with my companion, I wasn't intimidated by her because she was an authority figure.
Okay. So in other words, you attribute it more to the situation. You're not getting from him being dominant other than you need to believe these things.
Not in that moment. Eventually in the interview, it kind of turned to more dominant gaslighting, threatening, and...
How does that play out?
So like he started bearing his own testimony about the prophet and about temples. And
did you notice, did any of it have to do with Jesus Christ and being founded upon him, or was it just right into those subjects?
It was right into those subjects. He pointed to President Nelson, who was hanging on the wall in a picture. He's like, you need to trust that man. And you are representative of him and of the church.
In other words, he's specifically training you to view yourself as representing President Nelson? And
of the church, you know. And I kept saying throughout this interview, I just want to teach about Jesus Christ. I just want to teach about him. I just want to bring others closer to him. And when I had said that, he said, I don't know what your motives are for being a missionary. And I was like, I just told you. But he was like, I don't know what your motives are for being a missionary. Because you can't, how are you supposed to talk and testify of the prophet if you don't have a conviction of him?
You literally just tell him, I want to teach of the Savior. I don't trust your motives. How can you testify of the prophet? When you, 3 seconds earlier, were you here 5 seconds ago? I told you I want to testify of Jesus Christ. That's my motivation. And now he's distrustful of you for being founded on Christ.
The whole interview, he was like going back on his words as well. So, I was like, I think it's important to question things and gain your own founding. And then he'd be like, no, you don't, he's like, you should not encourage others to question these things. So don't tell any other missionaries what you're questioning. But then later in the conversation, he would say, it is important to question things and bring things to God. And I was like, why are you contradicting yourself, you know? Yeah. And I would say, I'm going to take the prophet's words and take them to God to confirm them with him. And he's like, you don't need to do that. He's a prophet. And then later he was like, it is important to confirm their words with God.
Yeah, I'll just add my own commentary. I've noticed that it as a distinct sign when the adversary is doing the messaging. There will be simultaneously held beliefs that contradict one another. And the person who's putting out those contradicting statements, they're unaware of it.
It's true. There was a lot of elements of that interview that are hard to remember, but he started to apply a lot of guilt tripping.
In what way?
In a way where it was like, how are you supposed to be a good missionary? How are you supposed to testify of Christ if you're not doing these things? It is breaking a commandment with God. God is upset with you. You are, you're not going to be able to speak by the Spirit. You're going to disrupt your fellow sisters, all this kind of stuff. And I was so bombarded. It's almost like when police are doing an interrogation.
Because you want to be a missionary. I mean, there's not the same level of pressure put upon sisters as there is on the young men. This is what you want to do, and now you're being confronted by the leader of the mission that you're a disruptor and you're a problem. Yes.
And I remember him saying, we're going to have to be careful with each other now. We're going to have to be careful around each other now because you don't believe in authority. You don't trust in men. You don't trust me as your mission president. So I don't know what to do with you. I don't know if I trust you in the mission field anymore. And I was like, I just want to bring people closer to Christ. And he's like, you focus too much on Jesus Christ. And you're trying to bring others to Christ your way, and you're supposed to be doing it the way the church wants you to do. I've also heard that you have not been reading what you're supposed to, because my personal studies, I would go off by myself and pray in my closet for like almost the whole time and just study, you know, wherever the Lord takes me in the scriptures. I wasn't studying how to preach my gospel every day. I was...
You've wandered off the reservation.
I did. And a very observant companion noticed these things too. And she told my mission president as well that I was, you know, reading things off the Doctrine of Christ Facebook page, reading these strange documents on my phone because she was just so observant. And she literally told him. She told him about the conversations that we had. And then she said... she gave him like exact numbers. 10 days after we had that conversation, she stopped wearing her garments again. That's what he told me. And I had no idea she said any of this to him. So he brought up all of that again. He's like, but she did all of this out of love. She did all of that. She told me this out of love, her love for you. And in my head, I was like, no, it's because she did it out of fear. She was scared of the things I was saying. And because the Spirit was pressing upon her of the truthfulness of the words I was saying, and it scared her. And so she went to the mission president to console her fears and gain confirmation again that what she does is correct and what I'm doing is wrong.
Okay. He no longer trusts you. He makes that very, very clear. I don't even know if I can trust you because you don't believe in me as your mission president. You're bringing people to Christ your way, not the church's way. And how many months into the mission did this showdown with the mission president happen?
I think it was like 3 months. Let's see, March, April, May, June. Yep, 3 months.
Yeah, it does make me think a little bit about the decision to have a year younger when missionaries and sisters go out into the mission field. Because between 18 and 19, especially with the internet now, you have lots of young men that say, well, let me dig into everything that I can so I can be prepped as a missionary. And it very commonly turns into, there's too many questions that I have for me to have desire to represent the church. It seems like some of these questions, you're getting prayerful about it, but it's happening early on in the mission. Mm-hmm. So how does the mission president deal with you? Is there companionship change that happens? Does it feel like you're being moved somewhere where you're going to be under controlled circumstances?
Well,
let me ask this. What instructions did he give you? Don't talk about this with other companions. What else?
So he said, do not tell the other sisters what you're thinking, what you're questioning. And then That's
very isolating. Was he offering to answer any more of your questions, or was he just saying, you keep your thoughts to yourself?
He tried answering. Well, I didn't have any questions for him.
In other words, was he willing to, was he expressing to where, if you have more questions, you can talk to me? Because he is very deliberately instructing you to isolate yourself in what you say.
So he did say that at the end of the interview. He's like, I hope you feel comfortable coming to me for questions. Even though I didn't ask him any questions during this interview. Yeah.
But I'm just thinking of the lack of self-awareness to where he literally says, I can't trust you. I don't know what you're doing in the mission field. I don't know what your motivations are, but I hope you trust me in coming to me because I'm going to give you more of this.
Yes. I was like, no, I don't. I don't feel safe with you. Like I felt very unsafe being with him, yeah. Very confronted.
It seems like he's unaware of when he literally becomes mentally abusive, isolates you, make you feel shame, make you feel guilt when you're expressing your testimony of the Savior. So what happens after that?
So, I mean, near the end of the interview, I kind of gave the same response that I gave a mission companion, where she was offering me all these incentives to believe what she believes. And I was like, no. And I kept resisting. And so that's kind of how it went. So we didn't really end in a conclusion, but he was just like upfront, and he was like, I want there to be an ending and a conclusion to this. So he was like, will you promise to wear your garments for the rest of your life? And I was like, oh my gosh.
Was it as forceful as you're expressing right now? Was like, bam, will you? Because that's commitment pattern that used to be taught to us missionaries.
It felt that way. I think it was. Maybe it wasn't as like loud as that, but it's
certainly how you remember it.
It was very commanding. And I was like, I was just silenced for a second. And then he kind of changed it a little. He was like, for the rest of your mission, at least. And I was like, I just felt so pressured. Just like a person in who's being interrogated by the police, who just like admits to being guilty, I was like, yes, I will. Because like I was just so full of like pressure.
What other answer could you give? Because here's what does happen. This pressure is being put upon me. What response can I give to make it so I no longer feel this pressure? And people will crack under those situations.
Yeah, I did crack. I honestly did. And I was just like, I was looking for any sort of relief to get out of this pressure. And he seemed to like not believe me when I said that, because multiple times through the interview, he was like, you're a liar. You're lying to me. Like, he's like, you're lying to me right now. And I was like, so full of pressure. I was like confused of what I needed to do. And so I don't think he even believed that I was going to actually wear them. But he was like, okay, you gave me your word. You have to do it now. And then he also tried to get me to say that I believe the prophet, or believe that Russell Nelson is a prophet.
How would he try to get you to do that?
He was like, I don't remember exactly how he worded the question, but he was like, will you believe, or will you testify that Russell M. Nelson is a prophet of God? And that's where I was like, I can't say that. I can't say yes. Okay.
Well, I think about this. I've always just taken it for granted the president of the church is a prophet. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I simply asked, what does it mean to be a prophet? Mm-hmm. And does he fit the bill? You went through this at a much earlier age, and it sounds like your mission president has never been through that. Was he in his 60s?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And he's never been through the process of sincerely analyzing, what does it mean to be a prophet of God? Mm-hmm. Is it by default that a church office makes you one?
Yeah. And I mean, it's because of my questioning of the prophet that he was concerned about how I went through the temple to get my endowment, because how was I able to get a temple recommend if I was questioning the prophet? And so that was also something that he brought up frequently during it and accused me of lying to get my temple recommend, when I told him at the time I wasn't lying, because I still had a conviction and I thought he was the prophet at the time. But he kept trying to like get me to admit that I was lying. I lied to get my temple.
Did you get the impression that he wanted you out of the mission?
Yes. There was a moment during the interview where he said, we're going to have to start thinking of if it's worthwhile you to stay on your mission because of these things. Because he can't trust me in the mission field. He was like, we're going to have to start thinking if it's best for you to stay on this mission, stay out. And it felt like a threat, like you're either going to believe what we believe, or you're not going to be here at all, sort of thing.
Okay. And it sounds like you've got a fireball testimony of the Book of Mormon. It's the foundation for you starting to analyze your current situation. Mm. You've got a fireball testimony of Jesus Christ. You're continuously expressing your desire to follow him and spread the restoration gospel. It just doesn't include temple garments and President Nelson. Mm. So what happened after that?
So, I mean, after he tried to convince me to confess my beliefs in the prophet, I said, can you give me time? Can you give me time to gain those convictions? And maybe his heart softened a little bit. And he was like, okay, I'll give you to the end of this transfer until our next time we have, and the next time we have a meeting, that's when I need your answer.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, I will do that. And I was very like full of nerves. Like I was like, what just happened to me? Like this was a whirlwind experience sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. So what's life like with your companion after that meeting with the mission president? What's life like with the companion as well as the missionary work you're involved in?
So after that day, I was like totally in my head, and I was
let me ask this.
A mess.
Are you and he both wearing masks in the interview?
No.
Okay.
So the mask regulation didn't have to occur if it was just missionaries for some reason. At Zone Conference, we had to wear masks or we skipped rows and stuff because COVID can't go side to side. Okay. It can only go forward.
So in other words, it seems like it's lax when you guys are around just each other.
Yeah.
But it is strict when outside observers might see you.
Yes. So, yeah. And I mean, things were becoming more lax a little bit in Tennessee anyway. So we didn't have to necessarily wear them in restaurants or anything.
Okay. So go to life with the mission companion and how the missionary work is progressing.
Yeah. So, So my next companion, she was really sweet. I was only with her for a transfer because my mission president actually called one day. And anytime I was like near the like mission building where all like the mission work happened and stuff, I like got really anxious. I was like, what if I see him? Like, what if he pulls me aside? All this kind of stuff. And so she got a call one day from the mission president, and we're all around the dinner table, and she puts it on speaker because that's what we have to do as missionaries. And he was talking to her, and he made her an STL.
What's STL?
An STL is a sister training leader. So there's like district leaders and zone leaders.
Oh.
And so they're sister training leaders. So they are
same thing, different acronym.
Yeah. So they're like in charge of all the sisters, but they can also help with the elders and stuff like that. Okay. So they're just like a leadership role. And
dude, I love the acronyms of the church, but keep going.
And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, is he doing this to have like closer eyes on me? Because I'm literally her companion. But who knows if that was actually the case. It's just how it felt. So that was like another element that happened with that. But, you know, our mission work like really was like blossoming, even though I was in such confusion and turmoil during the 6 weeks because I was battling like, do I like stay or do I go? Because like I need to make a decision. I need to know what I'm going to say when I see the mission president again. And so a lot of my personal studies, I was like crying in my closet, like asking God, pleading with him to tell me what I must do. Give me courage to do what he needs me to do, to follow his will. And I don't think my companion at the time really noticed anything. She wasn't as observant as my last companion.
Did you have any growth answering regarding garments or President Nelson, or did it seem to continue to solidify in the convictions you already had by that point?
Yeah, I mean, as I prayed and I saw more answers, I needed to know for sure. You know, I needed to know for sure if temple garments were of God and they were directed by God, or if they weren't, and if the prophet was actually a true prophet or not. And so those were a lot of things I was frequently praying about. And eventually, after much like wrestling in spirit and with the Lord in prayer, I came to the conclusion and got confirmation that temple garments are not from God, the current LDS temple garment as it is today, and that it actually acts as a barrier, as a shield from God's a more full version of God's light.
Yeah, because you personally experienced the spiritual apathy as you were trying to go about this sincerely and scientifically.
Mm-hmm. So that was even more added confirmation that this isn't right. And that also led to like priesthood, questioning like priesthood things and that authority. And then that also, I had to pray a lot about the president of the church, because that's a big thing to start questioning, a big thing to proclaim, is that he is not a true prophet of God. And so I had days where I was like, yes, he is a prophet. And I had days where I was like, no, he's not.
Well, what made you go back and forth? What is it that felt like, yes, he's a prophet because of this?
I think it wasn't necessarily because of anything. It's because of the environment I was in, and everyone else was like, yeah, he's a prophet. And I was like, maybe I've been wrong. So I was just like, have I been deceived? And it was like a very confusing, overwhelming time. And I remember this one time in zone conference, I was just under this weight in my mind of trying to decide what's right and wrong. And zone conference also stressed me out because I was like, there's a mission president. And I remember like everyone would go up and like shake his hand. And he was like, how are you doing, Sister Coulson? And I was like, I'm good. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. And I was really off that day. I felt really discouraged. And his wife, the mission president's wife, came in and got me out of one of the classes during zone conference. She's like, I need to speak with you. And I was like, okay. I thought it was going to be about some health issues that I've been having on the mission that she knew about. But she takes me into this separate room and she sits me down. And I was like expecting her to start asking me about like the stomach pains I've been having and what I'm doing with that. But she was like, I've heard you're having problems with your faith. And I was like, oh no. He told her. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And she started telling me and asking me questions. She was very different from her husband. She was not guilt-tripping me.
Ladies in general are more naturally nurturing.
She's very nurturing. She's very understanding. She was very like sympathetic, and I was very I felt like I could open up and be like, well, I've been questioning a few things. Like, I'm uncertain about this and I'm uncertain about that. And she started, like, you know, bearing her testimony about certain things. Somehow she ended up bearing a testimony about, like, tithing. And she's like, well, one time, you know, I got, because she's also a convert to the church. And she's like, one time we were almost got in a car accident, but we were saved. And I got the impression that was because I was paying my tithing and stuff like that.
Did it seem like she's responding to concerns you don't have?
Yeah, I was like, I didn't talk about tithing. But because tithing can be tied to, like, the prophet.
Yeah.
And, like, I guess that's why she decided to, like, bear that with to me that day. And I was like, okay. She's like, I want you to, like, work on these things and, like, take these things to God and, like study this and this and this. Like,
is she getting specific about these things? Is it still focused on President Nelson and garments?
Yeah, and, like, the church, and, like, so I can, like, gain a faith. She's like, don't doubt your faith or something.
Did she tell you to doubt your doubts?
Don't doubt your doubts.
Did she tell you to doubt your doubts? Because I was in General Conference not too long ago. Uchtdorf is famous for saying, doubt your doubts.
Yeah, I mean, I think she really emphasized, like, why would you give up all of this for like a doubt or question that you have, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Like, why would you, like, it's important to receive, like, a testimony of the prophet and a testimony of the church in general. So after that, I was like, yeah, okay, I'll ask questions about that. It wasn't as pressuring as her husband was. And I was like, dang, like, did she know how, like much pressure her husband would be underneath in that interview? Like, does she even know? Like, yeah. But after that, I was really more diligent in trying to find out if Russell Nelson was a prophet of God. And eventually, after, again, coming unto God and realizing the fruits that he showed, that he wasn't a prophet of God. And I received that confirmation very boldly and repeatedly in many prayers. And then I just started living what God taught me. And so I, like, whenever we were teaching someone and the prophet was brought up, I would testify of the Book of Mormon prophets and how important they were. And then I'd leave it to my companion to testify about whatever else she wants. If she wants to testify about Russell Nelson.
Your companion, I'm guessing, was aware of it. And realizes that she's not testifying of President Nelson. Probably.
But she was kind of unaware of a lot of things. I don't know if she really, like, thought about my behaviors and what I was doing because she was just so, like, focused on what she believes.
With missionaries as young as the church sends out these days, it's very difficult for them to have an understanding of what they're actually trying to do. There's a lot of, you can instruct me and have me learn some lessons that I can bring back upon demand in the right situation. Mm-hmm. But there's not the same amount of, I've had the mighty change of heart and I want to teach you how to have it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So next time you meet up with the mission president, how do things go?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole 6 weeks of that transfer, I was just trying to learn what my answer was going to be. And I was messaging a lot of people on the Doctrine of Christ. Like, I'd friended a lot
I think that's when I ended up receiving a message from you. And and I let you know a little bit about my faith journey to where... Mm-hmm.
That helped a lot. Like, hearing... Like, I felt so isolated, I guess, because, like, no one around me knows these things.
Well, not only is your mission president getting forceful to tell you to isolate in how you communicate from other missionaries, undoubtedly, he's trying to insulate other missionaries from having communication with you.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, the whole time I was just, like, feeling so alone. And so I just started even more, like, looking things in the Doctrine of Christ Facebook page and friending people on there. So I ran into, like, random people, and they were, like, reach out to me. And
Did you feel support? How did you feel it? What was changing as you're having interactions with the Doctrine of Christ community?
So I felt so much more encouraged in what I was doing, and I felt like, okay, like, this is, like, I'm not going crazy. Like, this isn't strange that my mission president has been, like, guilt tripping me, or that, like, I have this opportunity, because I'm grateful for this opportunity. I needed it to strengthen my faith, and so it was really great to talk to people who've had similar experiences, who have similar convictions, who believe the same things that I do. So I was really grateful for that. the knowledge that they brought and the comfort and the community. And I remember talking to several of them, like, we're praying for you. Like, we're all praying for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, that's great. And then I'd meet people who were like, oh, I've heard about you. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, that's amazing. Like, I have such a community. And I didn't feel as alone as I was before, I guess.
So how did your mission president respond? Did he allow you to stay out there in the mission field? So,
I'd received the answer that I was supposed to go home. And God had told me that. And so I was like, okay, that's my answer. And I immediately felt so much joy. Okay. And so I went into this interview. And I was, again, the last person to be interviewed that day.
Strategically positioned.
But I kind of requested it. I was like, this is going to be a long conversation. Because the last interview was like an hour and a half, 2 hours long. Like, it was a long conversation. I was in there for a while. And so I was like, I'm going to be last just so no one else is waiting. And he was like, okay. So we rearranged the schedule. And I walk in. I sit down. I have my scriptures in hand. I had marked them all up. I was like,
did you want to dive into the scriptures with him?
Yeah. I was like, I marked these scriptures. I had placed things, I was like, I'm going to teach him the doctrine of Christ. And he's going to listen. And so he sat down. And I sat down. And I was like, can we pray? And he was like, yeah, I guess. I was like...
If you wanna.
And I was like, great, I'm gonna pray. And so I cast out all the evil spirits that were in the room.
Oh, nice. Oh, goodness.
And I was like, I'm
sure that went over really well.
Yeah, he was like, what is this sister doing? But I casted out all the evil spirits in the room, and I called down angels of light and invited Jesus in the room and the Spirit, and so we can have a kind of instructive conversation and be productive and understanding, that our eyes will be open, all this kind of stuff. And I prayed, and then I ended the prayer, and I was clutching my scriptures, and I had been fearful the few days before, but now I was like, no, this is my Abinadi moment. I'm going to stand for what I believe. I'm going to testify of Christ. I was ready. And he just looks at me and he's like, okay, I'm going to let you go ahead. Because I guess he felt like I had things I wanted to say. And so I opened my scriptures to 2 Nephi 32. I started reading about second comfort, the doctrine of Christ, and I started going back to all these scriptures. I was like, so I have been learning about this and this and this, and I read about this, and I've come to the conclusion that we need to receive a baptism of fire and the Holy Ghost, and we need to see Christ in the flesh. It's like that's our true purpose. That's what the scriptures are trying to convey, and all these things. And I was flipping through all these scriptures, and I read Doctrine and Covenants 84, where it talks about how the church was condemned. And I read all that, and I was like, I believe the church is condemned. And likewise, and because of that, there's all this confusion and fallout, and then all these other things. And this is why we need to start repenting and have broken hearts and contrite spirits coming back unto God and Christ. So, and then I talked about, I think I read from 2 Thessalonians about how, if you are not a lover of truth, you're going to be placed under, a dark oath to believe a lie, to believe in men. And you're not supposed to trust in men. And so I went over that again. And then at the end, I was like, I know all these things to be true. And I took it all to God and I prayed. And he told me that it is time for me to go home. And I will pack my bags and it'll be ready when you have the next, when I have an airplane ticket available, on the next flight out. I just said it all like that. And he just sat there in silence for a second. And his face changed during it. He was surprised and his eyes open. And he was
Did he seem relieved at your decision to go home?
He seemed like he expected it in a way. Like he was already preparing to send me home.
Thank you for tuning in to part number 2 of my interview with Brynn Coulson Harris. Anything you can do to share this with others will help the channel to grow. It won't grow without you, so I appreciate all you can do. Thank you for hitting the like button, sharing, and subscribing. Tune into part number 3.